Welcome, Trial Tappers. I'm excited to be here tonight with Dr. Ruth Gerritsen McCain once again. You know, who are Trial Tappers? Trial Tappers are people that find hope, resilience, and post traumatic growth after life's trials and traumas. And I've written about this in my books, and I want to turn the tables on myself a little bit today. And I'm going to let Dr. McCain ask me questions to try to help us get a different side of the interview. So, Ruth, thanks for being here again, and let's go for it.
Sure. Thanks, Hugh. I'm so glad you're doing this because, again, your own story is so rich and so helpful, I think. And all of the years that I've known you, I've often wished and hoped that you would metamorphose, if you will, to the all incredible things that you're doing now. So I'm going to have some fun with this tonight because it is fun to, flip the tables, if you will. And
Great.
so I didn't ask you for a bio, and I didn't purposely because I'd like you to just share what you would consider a bio for us this evening before we delve into more succinct questions.
Yeah, I've been a clinical social worker for more than 20 years now, which is amazing to look back on that. And I started out working in group homes with girls that were struggling with all sorts of things. And then I ended up doing a little bit of juvenile probation work until I eventually went and got my master's degree. And so there I specialized in sex offenders and dysfunctional families. And at the University of Denver, and then I did that and became certified in domestic violence. So I worked with families for a long time, a few years with domestic violence, did some volunteer work with that. And then I eventually ended up coming and moving to Utah, where I started working in a prison. And then I eventually, within about a year, became the director of a residential program, therapeutic community. It was about 144 people. That's where I met you, and you're interning with me. And back then, before you went on to bigger and better things than me, but then I became the director of that at a 400 bed facility for that. So that was a great experience for me, learning about addictions and substance abuse and therapeutic communities. From there, I ended up moving to the federal probation system, where for the last 10 years I've been overseeing all the residential treatment, uh, all the treatment for sex offenders, mental health, and substance abuse for the entire state of Utah. So in between all that is when I, did a little bit here and there, did some counseling, group counseling, and then when you and I were working together doing those family counselings in the prison for a while, and now I do some part-time work doing couples and individual therapy at this time. So it's been an interesting career of how I've got from the old book, all the places will go from Dr. Seuss. I, I I would never imagine where I got to here to this day.
I appreciate hearing that so much. There is one little piece I'm going to ask you to reveal, though, because it still just puts a smile on my face for all social workers. Because I recall when you had to go for your training for the Federal Bureau with that piece, and you had to go back east, and you had to qualify on a certain range as a social worker. You still had to qualify, and could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I've been through two academies. I went through the Corrections Academy in Utah to get in working in a prison, and then when I went to the federal prison, federal corrections area, then I ended up going through their law enforcement academy. Yeah, social worker carrying a gun. It's kind of crazy, right? And um, yeah, I had quite an experience, and I write about this in my book, where they actually gave me a dysfunctional gun at the time, and we didn't know the trigger was broken, and it caused me all kinds of drama and stress. like, how come why can't I do this? And eventually everything was discovered. Uh, I was able to pass my qualifications and did very well there at the end of the academy. So it was great.
Yes, you did very well. In fact, I still tell people that story because I was so proud of this social worker doing such great things. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity to turn the tables on this such an important issue. And so the first question I would like to ask is, I'd like to know, you know, when you think about the trials that you have been through, how do you feel like those trials set you on this path and brought you to where you are now, where you're doing the work that you are doing?
Yeah, it was interesting. You're making me think back to just even applying for the social work program. They have these applications like, well, why do you qualify, or what makes you want to do this? And I mean, like many people, I grew up with a lot of different challenges, right? At the time, my parents were, had divorced, and um, we had different dynamics in my family's uh, relatives, addictions. I had some adopted brothers, Cody and another one, Dylan. So that was an experience, and those things. My mom grew up in foster care, so these different experiences that I had, these foster grandparents, and um, I took those experiences to get into the college. And as I look back at, like everyone that I work with, we have a variety of challenges that we go through, and I really look at that as every one of those experiences helped prepare me for bigger challenges that were coming. As notably as I talk about my books about my brother committed suicide, and then I had to deal with the when I was sexually abused as a child at the basically the same time. So all those challenges prior were preparing me for that, and that's kind of the impetus for my books. Is I really believe that we've all been going through trials, and they do prepare us for the ones that are ahead of us.
With that, because again, yes, we all certainly do, and yet, I think that which you bring to this whole conversation is so important. And so I'm curious, how did your personal strength increase after, I would say, this trial, but I would honestly feel like a better verbiage would be these trials, because there's certainly been more than one.
Yeah, as I talk about post-traumatic growth with a lot of my clients, and I really believe in that, and in all those areas, my personal strength. When I went through this, my brother committed suicide, and if you haven't heard the story, so my brother committed suicide. That was just devastating blow. Like, how am I helping all these people, doing all this counseling and so many people, and then my brother's not listening, and he ends up taking his life. At the same time, at the funeral, I'm greeted by the man that sexually abused me when I was a child. So that kind of next year was when I started writing my books. And even though I was trying to tell people, like, you can be stronger and don't live in shame and all this, I struggled for a long time trying to, as I wrote out my book, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write everything I know and everything I teach. I want everyone else in my family and anybody else will listen to know these concepts. I struggled for a long time still with, can I just not tell anyone about the sex abuse? I just went back and forth. It's like, I could tell this story about my brother and it would be fine. I can avoid all this. I don't need everyone to know. I really went back and forth quite a bit, and till eventually I was just like, no, I can't live in shame still from this guy. And I'm trying to teach people to you're stronger because of these experiences. So I need to tell everyone. So it was a, telling my family, telling my kids, telling everyone around me. It was a difficult time. Fortunately, I was also in therapy at the same time, working through those uh, that flip flop back and forth of what do I do. So now, I mean, even after I wrote it and published it, I was like, okay, here we go. People are going to start reading this, but now I feel like that burden has been lifted from me, and I can just go forward with it. And it has been interesting. And I hear people and they come up to me and like, thanks for sharing that with you. And I just hear that constantly from people. And so now I'm glad I did.
Well, and I'm glad you did as well, especially given the fact of we know the statistics are not great about boys, young men talking about sexual abuse, especially as children, that's a tough one to sell, and so your courage in owning that, expressing that, sharing that, I think is invaluable. So thank you for doing that. And I do find it interesting that here you are in a funeral setting, if you will, having lost your brother that I happen to know personally, that you took a tremendous amount of time trying to help him navigate, trying to be of support for him when he
Mhm.
made the choice and was successful in, taking his own life. And then this man comes in. And so I'm curious about how your spiritual strength grew, if it did, to allow you to forgive this situation, or how you have processed even what forgiveness looks like for your brother, because there are emotions certainly around that, and what it looks like in regards to this man who's violated you so badly.
Yeah, spiritual strength is definitely one of those areas of post traumatic growth that some people find some strength in that. And I see this a lot working with people in counseling that when a big trial comes, people either move closer towards it or away from it, or they have some kind of spiritual struggle in there. And I did too, because unfortunately, this took me all the way back to when I was being sexually abused. So, why it became a spiritual challenge for me was I was actually trying to memorize what we call our articles of faith in our religion to advance into get into the priesthood. I was being brought to him so he could teach me these articles of faith and help me memorize these articles of faith. Instead, it's all the abuse that happens. So, this world's a spiritual religion and this colliding for me, that was a difficult thing, repressed for a lot of years. And yet here we are bringing it back up again. So I wait, I didn't waver in my faith, but I was like, again, taken back there and struggling, like what was going on. Now, I had, some great friends and spiritual leaders that were able to, help me and work through that. And, as far as the forgiveness part, uh, I wouldn't say I'm at quite there yet to forgive that with him. Um, I know people will say it's can relieve my burden, and people. I watch people forgive. You did in your experience with uh, what happened with your husband, and that I know helps a lot of people. I'm not quite there yet with that, because I don't know that there's ever been any amends or anything on that from that side. But as when I think about with my brother, there's nothing have anything to forgive with my brother. Um, I I feel a loss, feel sorrow. I felt a lot of unworthiness. Like, why couldn't I do this or help him? But like you said, we were very close. I had him and my younger brother raised in my family for a little while with my kids, and uh, it was a close relationship up until the last couple of years when he was pulling away from us. So, all in, to say the spiritual connection, I'm still, I'm, I felt like it strengthened me, but I was taken aback for a minute.
Sure. And and that, if you will, a little even a more probing question around the whole context of forgiveness, because it certainly is a process, right?
Yes.
Navigating that. Oh my goodness. Um, did you feel like you had to work through forgiveness of self when it came to your brother, whether or not it was an actual valid situation, but as you were processing that in your own mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I am at peace with my relationship with my brother.
Good.
We never had a big blow up or arguments or anything like that. Um, he just pulled away from us near the end when he was struggling, and so my my forgiveness, I guess, I think part of me writing the books was just look, um, I haven't been helping enough people. I haven't been helping my family. I need to let my kids know, my grandkids know, like all these things that I'm teaching it during the day and all these other people. I need to get it out there. And so I felt like driven for quite a while. Like I need to get this done so that I can maybe take that off of my plate. Like I've done enough in that area.
Thank you. I and just thank you so much for sharing those very vulnerable pieces. And so I'm curious, so how did your relationship with others help you in your growth, or did it?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when people that even I work with trying to find post traumatic growth. They experience many things that I've experienced. Like some people I felt pulled away from me, and yet now I'm still at peace when that happens because I recognize they just didn't know what to say to me or how to engage that, or maybe they were going through their own stuff with their own family. So, but some people that I thought would be there for me weren't, and then yet people that I wasn't expecting were coming forward. Uh, Coworkers, for example, just amazing. Some would come in and cry with me, and like I was like, wow, I never expected this. Our relationship went to new levels in that area. Um, some of my best friends, uh, college friend of mine, like just coming to help and support me. And it's interesting when we talk about post traumatic growth. They talk about this idea of having an expert companion, and that's not necessarily a therapist yet. I did use therapy, but one of my friends just come and just sit with me. You know, just can't fix it. Just sit with me. Uh, just let me be. With them, and that was it's still a neat thing for having them to check up on me on occasion. I have got another good close friend from work who like that relationship is bonded. So it's been an interesting piece to see that.
It sounds like at least the two examples that you've given there, that they were really able to hold space for you and just
Yes,
witness the space and
yes.
witness your process. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. So, how have you found a new appreciation for life after your trauma? or after these pieces of trauma, because we know trauma, we never know, right?
Yeah, I think whether it's through that, um, I've had other difficult things happen, whether my wife's had some illness problems, um, you know, that I appreciate so much more the time that I have with my family members that maybe I wasn't or was taking for granted. Um, my my impact on other people, um, the little, and I think as you get older, and I start experiencing this, like, oh, I only have so much more time, and I need to take advantage of everything that I have, and appreciate the friends that I have, the life that I have, the people that I'm impacting. It's just been it's it's a neat thing to experience. I wish it didn't take necessarily that to go through to think, wow, I need to pay more attention to what's going on. But here we are.
Yeah, that's something I think we can all really hear and gain from. And this next question you spoke to a little bit, but maybe you could even dig a little deeper for us. And that is if you could share with us the new possibilities that have opened up and how you've moved forward with your life to impact others. I could give a list, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ever write some books. I
I
wasn't going to do YouTube videos. I mean,
know.
I was anti social media for up until a few years ago, right? I just was not on anything. And writing books, like, who am I to write books? And I just wasn't there. So, anyways, it was this new possibility. Like, I just felt like this impression, like, I need to write everything that I've ever taught in all my classes and all my stories, and then I all these different people that I knew, because a lot of the stories in my book talk about what I call TAPS, or trial action paths, for that other people have gone through, like you, like other people, and so I want to tell their stories and help other people see, like, this is a possibility to get through these things. And so it was that that I'm going to start presenting more. I mean, I presented small to my work and smaller groups, but now I'm speaking to larger groups, and obviously in the social media world. So it's opened up a lot of new possibilities for me, and I'm just amazed that the opportunities there, and that people listen, and that it's a lot of work, and not knowing if anyone was going to pay attention to that. But then I was in another state, and someone came up to me and was like, I really appreciate your book. And I was like, wow, okay, that's awesome.
I really appreciate that. And I think back because you're one of my great, not only friends now, but one of my original mentors and teachers. And I still have some of your drawings of different theoretical pieces you were putting together when we were working in the prison together. And um, I have to say, it makes me reflect on when we did a rotation through uh, individuals who were incarcerated as sexual predators. And I would have never guessed what you had been through because, given my own experiences along those lines as a child, I was very anxious about would I be able to handle this. But I went off of your cue, if you will, and you got me through. We won't talk about the antisocial you put me with one time because that's a whole nother story for another day. But
Yeah, I have to say, when I went to graduate school, I was like, if I can do this, I can do anything. So I'm gonna go and do work with these victims and such. I hadn't really gotten through my stuff, and that's sad to say, but I thought I was over it, and I wasn't. once it was confronted to me, I was like, okay, there's still a couple things back there I need to deal with.
Sure, sure. So speaking of, you know, what you've done, what you've accomplished, I'm curious, so what accomplishment are you proud of in life?
Hmm. Yeah, I will say my biggest accomplishment is I've been married 28 years.
Whoop.
Yeah, and me and my wife, and it's awesome. Now, like everyone, there's ups and downs, and we've had struggles, but I'm proud to say that we're still together. You know, uh, my books, obviously, I'm proud to say I have something to leave behind. When I think of, I've got three boys and grandkids now, and that's an awesome thing, and I have good relationships with them, and I have three wonderful daughter-in-laws, and that's always fun. So that accomplishment with them, and my career's been great. I've really enjoyed the impact that I've had, and so I'm proud about working, with that and what I've done, and then I think it's neat to see just on the individual level when I get to work with people. I just had someone this last week who we just finished, and he was like, I never liked therapy. I never even thought it was something I would ever do. And like, I'm glad I came. I was like, so excellent. That's what I'm hopeful, spread the word, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what advice do you have for others that are going through a trial or trauma?
Yeah, hang in there. My family's got a motto. We say, this too shall pass, and reach out to people, get whatever help you need. Maybe it's counseling, maybe it's clergy. Hang in there. I really believe, and I always teach this, like, you have been prepared for this, in that sense of you've gone through trials in your life, and you can use those skills to try to get through this one. But it can take time. Uh, Sometimes it can take a lot of time to get through it, and there's no one right way. That's, I would say, my advice. Grieving, struggles, people do it differently, and don't think, well, I'm doing it different. I should be doing it this way or a different way. There's no right way to get through it. There's some general guides that we talk about with counseling to help people through that, but that's probably my advice.
Well, and what that sparks for me too is that you've spoken with, like in your books and such, is there's an innate resiliency as you've survived traumas in your life. The fact that you're still there, the fact that you're, even still dwelling with them and all of these other pieces, there's it's a commentary also to resiliency. Um, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I love the concept, and I mentioned this in my books, is that that resiliency has uh, been coined as the ability to bounce back to the same level. But um, I really think when people find this post traumatic growth, that they can go to a higher level in growth, and I see that. Um, it's amazing to me when I work with people, and they'll be like, when I start, they're like, maybe it's a divorce or something, like, this is the worst thing ever, and then a year later, like, this was the best thing ever. And when I see people get cancer, and they're like, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I have all these appreciation and all these connections. When I see people that are injured or lost their careers or whatever, and now they have, at first it was like just whatever, so traumatic, and then now they've grown from that. When I see the difference, of, we define trauma in a lot of different ways, but the idea that you get to define your trauma, whatever that is, and I can't say that's not really trauma. Well, what if you think it's trauma? Then that's trauma. But when I see people have this mission or purpose in life to go and do something to overcome and share and grow from that. When I see people that, have been whatever abused and now they're helping other people in those situations because it's been, they've gone through therapy and time, they've got through that. So that's 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 a neat thing.
That is a neat thing. Well, I'm going to ask you some fun questions now
Okay.
because I like putting you on the spot, just like you put me on the
All
spot
right.
long ago. So, Mr. Watt, what are your favorite hobbies?
Well, I like gardening. That's probably my peaceful place. I've taught square foot box gardening. I've taught that for years to a lot of people. I've had a garden for probably the last 21 years. I've had a garden. And so I really like that, or spending time in the yard or keeping my yards neat. When I when I'm having a bad day, or having a lot of stress, you can find me outside working in the garden, with nature or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, got a hobby of hummingbirds. I really like hummingbirds, and so I like to spend that time outside with my hummingbirds, and
Nice.
that's a fun thing for me. Um, I do a lot of building. Um, I can repair things and feel like I'm fixing something quick and see a result, and so I like to do that too.
I love that. That should be your next book. And speaking of books, what are your favorite books?
You know, uh, Obviously, I always recommend my books. But I
As you
will.
should.
I do spend some time reading in the scriptures, but when I get to therapy stuff, I recommend probably one of the neatest books was The Anatomy of Peace by the Arbinger Institute. I love that book. I recommend that a lot. With marriages, so why marriages succeed or fail by John Gottman, or a lot of the Gottman books. Um, I recommend that a lot. Brene Brown book. I some of her books I'll recommend to a lot of people. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Right, that's a great book. Um, the Reality of Perception. That's a good one. Uh, Brad Anderson's The View from Under My Desk. But then I have some other ones like Jeff Denning's got one on Warrior SOS, which is for a law enforcement military type going through traumas with those things. So those are some of the books. I'm always listening to books. I probably at any time I've got two or three that I'm trying to bounce between, but I do a lot of listening to books now.
So, we want to dig deep now into the dark recesses of your mind and have you tell us something that we don't know about you.
Mm.
And I know a few things, but what do we not know about you?
Well, a couple of things. One, I lived in Israel for like 3.5 months and got to go through the pyramids and up the Nile and Egypt and all that. That was fun. But one of the things, uh, growing up, I spent a lot of time in our family business decorating weddings.
Ah,
And I, through college, had taken that business with me to college and decorated weddings for a little while through college. So I, I've done a lot of that.
I love that. I want to circle back just a second though for your time in Israel because I remember a story that you shared with me, and I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And I think our listeners would find it interesting as well. Uh, what it was like walking to to the Palestine area and then walking back to the Israeli area, how you were treated as you're walking there and how you were treated as you were walking back.
Oh, it's kind of interesting. It's the whole area they they there's a lot of dynamics going on there. I love both. I love both sides. I never took sides of what was going on. Um, sometimes I was amazed that we would walk through all kinds of neighborhoods and things and not have any problems. And then sometimes I'd have people throwing bottles at me for being an American and, whatever was going on in the US and I didn't know what was happening. So, but in general, I would say people treated me really nice and uh, welcomed me into their homes and all that. I felt like they protected me when there was violent things happening. So it was a great experience for me.
Yeah, I think that's just so fascinating. It's as citizens of the world, if you will, that when we can kind of take those to heart. And I'm heading there in November, so I've been reflecting on a lot of the things that we've shared through the years about that.
Nice.
So as we come to the end of our time this evening, I'm curious if there's anything else you'd like to share with us.
Well, I think as I've written things and taught so many people, my biggest thing is it keeps coming to my mind is that there's hope, no matter what you're going through. Have hope that you'll get through this. Um, no matter what the trial, I believe you are stronger than you think you are, and that you're going to find the help around you. You're going to make it through this. This is a temporary thing, and that's what I wish my brother would have understood, that this was temporary, what he was going through, and that he had some hope, that he could have reached out um, to anybody and to help them. I think on the other side of that coin for me is when things like that have happened, uh, like not to blame yourself. Like I can't blame myself for what other people have done to me or to themselves, and just try to go forward with one day at a time. This too will pass.
Yeah. And the thought that occurs to me as you share that is that whole context around love of self, right? In a fashion that comes from that resiliency, that strength, that self-forgiveness, because we can be so accusatory of ourselves. Well, if I hadn't done this, then this wouldn't have happened. And it's such a exercise in futility, and it is just not helpful.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Well, it's been wonderful being with you this evening. And I'm going to turn the tables back now as you now have the host hat back on you as we wind it up.
Well, thanks so much, Ruth, for going through that with me. It made me think a lot about what I've gone through and how I'm helping other people. So, finally, trial tappers, I know anyone can become a trial tapper through the trials that you go through. Our motto is we find hope, we find the strength, and we grow stronger from the trials in our life. So, we're going to be doing more of these video podcasts. So if you're interested in watching about how somebody else overcame a trial, became a trial tapper, then you're going to want to watch these next videos.